The Galactic Council's military academy on Zentari Prime buzzed with the usual mixture of excitement and nervous energy that came with the arrival of new species. Admiral Kexthan, a towering Vorthok with skin like burnished copper, stood before the assembled cadets representing dozens of worlds. His forearms gestured dramatically as he outlined the day's exercise. "Today, you will observe the newest members of our alliance," he announced, his translator rendering his gravelly voice into smooth standard galactic. "The humans have finally been granted military observer status, and we shall see what their primitive world has to offer our advanced civilization." Scattered laughter rippled through the amphitheater. The cadets had heard the reports. Earth was a backwater planet that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Their technology was laughably outdated, their ships barely capable of interstellar flight, and their weapons were still based on chemical propulsion. It was almost embarrassing that the Council had agreed to let them participate at all. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun stood at the back of the observation deck, her hands clasped behind her back in perfect military posture. She was small by galactic standards, barely reaching the shoulder of most species present, but her calm demeanor and steady gaze commanded respect from the few who bothered to notice her. The United States Marine Corps had chosen her carefully for this assignment. She was not just a representative of human military capability, but a demonstration of it. The first exercise began with standard galactic weapons training. Plasma rifles that could cut through reinforced hull plating, particle beams that could disable electronics at range, and energy shields that could deflect most known projectile weapons. The alien cadets performed admirably, their shots precise and devastating against the reinforced targets. "Impressive," murmured Cadet Zelenora, a sleek Ecolian whose feathered crest shimmered with bioluminescent patterns. "Their accuracy rate exceeds 90% at 300 meters. "Of course it does," replied her companion, a hulking Crom whose exoskeleton gleamed under the artificial sunlight. "These weapons have auto-targeting systems, predictive trajectory algorithms, and quantum-locked targeting matrices. Only a primitive species would rely on manual aiming." Sarah listened to their conversation through her universal translator, saying nothing. She had been briefed on galactic military doctrine during her 3-month preparation for this assignment. The galaxy had indeed moved beyond kinetic weapons centuries ago, relying instead on energy-based systems that were undeniably powerful but also predictable. Every shot left an energy signature, every weapon required significant power cells, and every system could be disrupted by the right countermeasures. Admiral Kexthan approached her position, his massive form casting a shadow over the human observer. "Lieutenant Commander Chun, we have prepared a demonstration station for your species' weapons. I trust you have brought examples of your traditional armaments?" "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, her voice steady and professional. "I have several representative samples of current human military technology." The Admiral's expression was polite but clearly dismissive. He had reviewed the technical specifications Earth had provided, and they read like museum pieces. Chemical-powered projectile weapons with ranges measured in mere kilometers, primitive optical sights, and ammunition that relied on simple kinetic energy rather than sophisticated energy matrices. It was charming in an antiquated way, like watching someone demonstrate how to make fire with flint and steel dot as they walked toward the designated firing range. Other cadets began to gather. Word had spread quickly through the academy that the humans were about to demonstrate their weapons, and curiosity was high. Most expected a brief, educational display of how far the galaxy had progressed beyond such crude methods. The firing range itself was a marvel of galactic engineering. Holographic targets could be programmed to simulate any threat scenario. Environmental conditions could be adjusted from Arctic cold to desert heat, and the range extended for several kilometers across a carefully controlled artificial landscape. Energy weapons made such distances trivial, but it seemed excessive for demonstrating. Primitive projectile weapons. Sarah opened her equipment case with practiced efficiency, removing each piece with the reverence of a craftsman handling fine tools. The first weapon she withdrew was her M4OA6 sniper rifle, its matte black finish designed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The telescope-mounted scope was a work of art in itself, precision engineered to provide clear targeting at extreme distances. "This is your primary weapon?" asked Cadet Thrixel, an insectoid Hyveni whose compound eyes reflected light in prismatic patterns. "It appears rather crude." "It serves its purpose," Sarah replied simply, running her hands along the rifle's familiar contours. She had carried this weapon through 3 combat deployments, and it had never failed her when it mattered most. Admiral Kexton gestured toward the range. "Please demonstrate this device's capabilities." "We have prepared targets at standard engagement distances." Sarah nodded and moved to the firing position, settling into the prone stance that had been drilled into her through countless hours of training. She adjusted the bipod legs with minute precision, checked her scope settings, and began the familiar ritual of preparing for a long-range shot. The assembled aliens watched with polite interest as she went through her pre-shot routine. It seemed unnecessarily complicated compared to simply pointing a plasma rifle and pulling the trigger. Why would anyone choose such an elaborate process when technology could handle the calculations automatically? "The target is 300 meters, Admiral Kexton announced. "Standard range for infantry weapons training?" Sarah glanced up from her scope, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "With respect, sir, that's quite close for this weapon system. Would it be possible to engage targets at a more appropriate distance?" The Admiral exchanged glances with his staff officers. The human was asking for longer range. Their own weapons were most effective at 300 to 500 meters, with maximum effective range rarely exceeding a kilometer even for specialized sniper variants. "Very well," he said, activating the range controls. 1 kilometer. Sarah nodded and returned to her scope, but then looked up again. "Sir, I should mention that this rifle is capable of engaging targets at considerably greater distances. If the range allows it, I'd prefer to demonstrate at a distance more representative of actual capability." Now the Admiral was genuinely curious. The technical specifications had indicated maximum ranges of less than 2 kilometers, which seemed optimistic for such primitive technology. "What range would you suggest?" 1,500 meters would be adequate for a basic demonstration," Sarah replied, her tone matter-of-fact. A murmur ran through the assembled cadets. 1,500 meters was beyond the effective range of most galactic infantry weapons. Only specialized ship-mounted weapons typically engaged targets at such distances, and those relied on computer-assisted targeting systems with quantum-locked guidance. Admiral Kexton programmed the range computer, and a holographic target materialized in the distance, barely visible to most of the observers even with their enhanced optical systems. The target was a standard military silhouette, human-sized and marked with scoring rings for accuracy assessment. Sarah settled back into position, her breathing slow and controlled. She adjusted her scope's magnification and began the calculations that had become second nature through years of training and combat experience. Wind speed and direction, air density, temperature, humidity, even the slight rotation of the planet beneath her feet. Variables that galactic weapons simply ignored through technological brute force. But that meant everything when dealing with a projectile that relied on ballistic physics. The silence stretched as she took her time. Far longer than any energy weapon would require to acquire and engage a target. Some of the younger cadets began to fidget, wondering if the primitive human technology had malfunctioned. Then Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger. The crack of the rifle was sharp and sudden. Unlike the hum and whine of energy weapons, the chemical propellant drove the precision-crafted bullet down the barrel at nearly 3 times the speed of sound, its copper jacket gleaming as it traced a perfect parabolic arc across the range. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The target was too distant for most observers to see clearly, and there was no energy beam or plasma bolt to track across the intervening space. Some cadets began to whisper among themselves, wondering if the shot had missed entirely. Then the range computer's voice announced the results in crisp, emotionless tones. Target struck. Center mass. Perfect score. Admiral Kexton blinked his 4 eyes in sequence, a sign of surprise among his species. He activated his personal scope enhancer and focused on the distant target. There, precisely in the center of the scoring rings, was a small hole where the human projectile had passed through the holographic display's solid backing plate. Remarkable accuracy, he admitted, though his tone suggested he considered it a fortunate shot. Your weapon appears to function adequately at extended range. However, I noticed that it requires significant time to aim and fire compared to our standard energy weapons. In actual combat, such delays would prove fatal. Sar. 3 weeks after the demonstration at Centauri Prime, Admiral Kexton found himself aboard the flagship of the Galactic Defense Fleet, surrounded by the most senior military commanders from across known space. The emergency session had been called after his initial report reached the council chambers, and the implications were still being debated at the highest levels of government. Explain to me again how a single primitive projectile defeated our most advanced shielding technology, demanded General Yithkar, the Saurian representative whose scaled features betrayed deep frustration. Our energy barriers have protected galactic civilization for over 2 centuries. They've never been breached by kinetic weapons. Admiral Kexton activated the holographic display, showing detailed sensor readings from the human demonstration. The projectile achieved a muzzle velocity of approximately 1,000 meters per second, far exceeding the kinetic energy thresholds our shields are designed to handle. Additionally, the ammunition's construction focused that energy into an extremely concentrated impact point. But that's impossible, protested Admiral Velther, her crystalline form refracting light in agitated patterns. Our shields calculate incoming projectile velocities and adjust barrier strength accordingly. If human weapons truly achieved those velocities, our sensors would have detected and compensated for them. That's precisely the problem, Admiral Kexton replied grimly. Our sensors are calibrated to detect energy weapons and the relatively slow projectiles fired by galactic kinetic weapons. Human ammunition moves too fast for our standard detection algorithms to properly track and respond to. The assembled commanders fell into troubled silence. Galactic military doctrine had evolved around the assumption that energy shields provided near-absolute protection against kinetic attacks. If that assumption was wrong, it meant that every major military installation, every important command ship, and every high-value target in the galaxy was vulnerable to attack by weapons that most civilizations had abandoned centuries ago. Fleet Admiral Zephyrin, the supreme commander of galactic forces, leaned forward in his command chair. His ancient species had seen the rise and fall of multiple galactic civilizations, and his experience carried weight that few dared to question. Admiral Kexton, what is your assessment of human military capability based on this demonstration? Sir, I believe we have fundamentally misunderstood Earth's approach to warfare, Admiral Kexton replied carefully. Their weapons technology appears primitive because we've been measuring it against our own technological standards. However, their systems are optimized for effectiveness rather than sophistication. They've solved tactical problems that we didn't even realize existed. Such as? Prompted General Yithkar. Stealth, for one, Admiral Kexton brought up another section of his report. Human projectile weapons produce no energy signature when fired. Unlike our plasma rifles or particle beams, there's no way to trace a kinetic round back to the shooter's position using standard sensors. The only detection method is visual or acoustic, both of which can be minimized through proper positioning and equipment. The implications were staggering. Galactic warfare had become increasingly technological, with battles often decided by sensor networks and automated targeting systems. The idea of soldiers who could strike without being detected by those same systems represented a fundamental shift in tactical thinking. Admiral Velther's crystalline form pulsed with nervous energy. Are you suggesting that human soldiers could infiltrate our facilities and eliminate personnel without triggering our security protocols? I'm suggesting that our security protocols may not be designed to detect the kind of threats that humans specialize in creating. Admiral Kexton replied diplomatically. Fleet Admiral Zephyrin touched several controls on his command console. and a new holographic display materialized showing the current disposition of galactic forces along the outer rim. Gentlemen, we have a more immediate problem than theoretical vulnerabilities. Intelligence reports indicate increasing pirate activity in the Kepler sector, and our standard patrols have been ineffective in locating their base of operations. Perhaps this presents an opportunity to observe human tactical methods in actual combat conditions. General Yokar's scaled crest rose in interest. You're proposing to invite the humans to participate in active military operations? I'm proposing to offer them the chance to demonstrate their capabilities in a real-world scenario. Fleet Admiral Zephyrin corrected. If their methods prove effective, we learn valuable lessons about unconventional warfare. If they prove ineffective, we confirm our existing tactical doctrines and move forward with standard procedures. Admiral Kexton considered the proposal carefully. He had been impressed by Lieutenant Commander Chun's professionalism and competence, but actual combat was far more complex than controlled demonstrations. However, the pirate problem in the Kepler sector had resisted conventional solutions for months, and unconventional approaches might be exactly what the situation required. I'll contact Earth Command and extend the invitation, he said finally, though I suspect they'll want to send more than a single observer for active operations. 2 days later, the transport ship arrived at Kepler Station carrying a team that surprised even Admiral Kexton with its composition. Instead of the large, heavily armed force that Galactic Doctrine would have deployed, Earth had sent just 4 individuals, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun, whom he already knew, along with 3 other specialists whose equipment and demeanor suggested capabilities far beyond their modest numbers. The team leader introduced himself as Captain Marcus Rodriguez, a compact man whose quiet intensity reminded Admiral Kexton of a coiled spring. Admiral, thank you for this opportunity. My team is prepared to assist with your pirate problem using whatever methods prove most effective. Captain, I should warn you that standard galactic intelligence estimates suggest the pirates number in the hundreds, possibly thousands, Admiral Kexton said. They've established a hidden base somewhere in the asteroid fields, and our fleet patrols haven't been able to locate it despite months of searching. Captain Rodriguez exchanged glances with his team members, and Admiral Kexton caught the hint of a smile. Sir, large numbers aren't necessarily an advantage if they're not properly deployed. Sometimes a small team with the right skills can accomplish more than an entire fleet. The confidence was either admirable or naive, but Admiral Kexton decided to reserve judgment until he saw results. He provided the human team with all available intelligence on pirate activities, patrol routes, and suspected hiding locations. The data filled several holographic displays and represented thousands of hours of reconnaissance work. Captain Rodriguez studied the information for less than an hour before reaching his conclusions. The pirates are using the asteroid field as cover, but they need regular supply runs and communication with outside contacts. Their base has to be positioned to allow rapid transit to major shipping lanes while remaining hidden from your patrols. Obviously, replied Commander Stelvik, the Galactic Fleet's chief intelligence officer. His 4-armed frame towered over the human captain, and his tone carried the condescension of someone explaining simple concepts to children. We've identified 17 possible locations that meet those criteria and investigated each one thoroughly. With respect, sir, you've investigated them using galactic reconnaissance methods, Captain Rodriguez replied politely. Ships, sensors, energy-based scanning systems, all of which can be detected and avoided if someone knows what to look for. And how exactly do your people propose to conduct reconnaissance without ships or sensors? Commander Stelvik asked, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles with obvious skepticism. Captain Rodriguez nodded to one of his team members, a woman whose equipment seemed designed more for hiking than military operations. Sergeant Kim specializes in long-range reconnaissance using primarily passive observation techniques. She can gather intelligence on target locations without alerting the inhabitants to her presence. Admiral Kexton studied the human sergeant with new interest. She was small even by human standards, and her gear consisted largely of what appeared to be camping equipment rather than advanced military hardware. Sergeant, how exactly do you propose to investigate asteroid installations without detection? Sir, most of the target locations are on asteroids large enough to support surface operations. Sergeant Kim replied in a soft voice that somehow commanded attention. I can approach on foot, establish concealed observation positions, and monitor activity patterns using passive optical methods. Pirates trying to remain hidden won't be expecting someone to walk up to their front door and watch them. The concept was so simple it was almost absurd. Galactic reconnaissance relied on sophisticated scanning technology and high-speed data collection from safe distances. The idea of someone actually physically approaching enemy positions and observing them directly seemed impossibly primitive and dangerous. The nearest suspected location is 18 kilometers from the closest safe approach point, Commander Stelvik pointed out. The asteroid's surface is vacuum with no atmosphere and temperature extremes that would kill most organic life forms within minutes. Sergeant Kim nodded. Sergeant Kim returned from her reconnaissance mission 62 hours after departure, and the intelligence she brought back fundamentally changed everything the Galactic Fleet thought they knew about the pirate operation in the Kepler sector. The third location is definitely their main base, she reported to the assembled command staff. Her voice calm despite having spent 3 days in hard vacuum crawling across asteroid surfaces. But it's not just a pirate hideout. This is a major criminal enterprise with connections throughout the sector. Admiral Kexton studied the detailed photographs and tactical sketches she had compiled during her surveillance. The images showed installations far more sophisticated than intelligence estimates had suggested, with defensive systems that would require significant fleet assets to overcome through conventional assault. How many personnel did you observe? Asked Commander Stelvik, still somewhat amazed that passive reconnaissance had yielded more detailed information than months of sensor sweeps. Approximately 400 on the main asteroid, with maybe 50 more distributed across 3 smaller support positions, Sergeant Kim replied, consulting her notes. But here's the important part. They're not all pirates. Most of them are support staff, technicians, and logistics personnel. The actual combat force is maybe 60 individuals. Captain Rodriguez leaned forward with interest. Command structure? Highly centralized, Sergeant Kim continued. There's clearly one primary leader who makes all major decisions, supported by 4 senior lieutenants who control specific operational areas. Eliminate those 5 individuals and the entire organization would collapse into chaos. General Yuthkar scaled crest rose in skepticism. Surely they have backup leadership and established succession protocols. No successful criminal organization would be that vulnerable to decapitation strikes. Sir, with respect, that assumes they're organized like a military unit, Captain Rodriguez interjected. Criminal organizations often depend on personal loyalty and fear-based hierarchies. Remove the key personalities and the entire structure can disintegrate very quickly. Lieutenant Commander Chun had been studying the tactical photographs with professional interest, paying particular attention to sight lines and positioning. Sergeant Kim, what's the maximum range from concealed positions to the command areas? 2.8 kilometers from the best vantage point, Sergeant Kim replied immediately. Clear line of sight to the main administration complex. Minimal atmospheric interference and excellent concealment among the surface rock formations. Environmental conditions? Low gravity, approximately 0.3 Earth normal. No wind, obviously, but there will be minor gravitational variations due to the asteroid's irregular mass distribution. Temperature is steady at minus 120 Celsius. Lieutenant Commander Chun nodded thoughtfully. Workable conditions. The cold will actually help with thermal management, and low gravity reduces bullet drop significantly. Admiral Kexton found himself once again amazed by human, matter-of-fact discussion of what seemed like impossible operational parameters. Lieutenant Commander, you're seriously proposing to make precision shots across nearly 3 kilometers in vacuum conditions? Sir, vacuum conditions actually provide several advantages, she replied calmly. No atmospheric interference, no wind deflection, and completely predictable ballistic trajectories. The primary challenge will be accounting for the variable gravity field, but Sergeant Kim's reconnaissance data provides excellent baseline information for those calculations. What about after the first shot? Pressed Commander Stelvik. Once you eliminate the primary target, the others will be alerted and take defensive measures. Lieutenant Commander Chun's expression grew slightly predatory. That's where the tactical advantage of this weapon system becomes most apparent. By the time the first target's security personnel realize what's happening and begin searching for threats, the second target will already be eliminated. Energy weapons leave distinct signatures that allow defenders to triangulate shooter positions. Kinetic projectiles provide no such information. Captain Rodriguez activated a holographic display showing the asteroid installation's layout. Based on Sergeant Kim's observations, we can establish a timeline for systematic elimination of command personnel. The key is identifying moments when targets are isolated and eliminating them in sequence before the organization can respond effectively. What about their defensive systems? Asked General Yithkar. Intelligence reports indicate they have energy shields, automated weapon turrets, and sensor networks. All designed to counter conventional galactic threats, Captain Rodriguez replied. Ship-based assaults, energy weapon attacks, and standard boarding operations. They're not prepared for a single individual approaching on foot and engaging targets from extreme range with kinetic weapons. Admiral Kexton was beginning to see the elegance of the human approach. Where galactic forces would attempt to overwhelm pirate defenses through superior firepower, the humans planned to bypass those defenses entirely by operating outside the parameters the pirates had planned for. Captain, assuming your team successfully eliminates the command structure, how do you propose to deal with the remaining personnel? 400 individuals, even without leadership, represent a significant threat. Actually, sir, they represent an opportunity, Captain Rodriguez replied with a slight smile. Pirates are criminals, not soldiers. They're motivated by profit, not ideology or loyalty. Remove their leadership and their profit structure, and most will surrender rather than fight a battle they can't win. And if they don't surrender? Pressed Commander Stelvik. Then we adapt our tactics accordingly, Lieutenant Commander Chun said quietly. But in my experience, criminals prefer living to dying for someone else's cause. Fleet Admiral Zephyrin, who had been monitoring the briefing from the Fleet Command Center, finally spoke. Captain Rodriguez, your assessment is that a 4-person team can accomplish what an entire battle group has been unable to achieve for 6 months. Sir, a battle group is designed to win large-scale engagements against organized military forces, Captain Rodriguez replied respectfully. This situation requires a different approach entirely. Sometimes the right tool for the job isn't the biggest or most powerful one. The ancient fleet admiral was quiet for several moments, considering the implications. His species had survived multiple galactic conflicts by understanding when conventional wisdom needed to be abandoned in favor of practical results. Very well, he said finally. Operation authorization granted. You have 72 hours to complete your mission before we initiate standard assault procedures. Thank you, sir. We'll only need 24 hours, Captain Rodriguez replied confidently the next morning. Admiral Kexton found himself aboard an observation ship positioned at the edge of the asteroid field, monitoring human operations through passive sensors. The criminal base appeared completely normal, with regular patrol patterns and communication schedules proceeding exactly as Sergeant Kim had documented during her reconnaissance. Contact established, came Lieutenant Commander Chun's voice over the communication system. In position and beginning target acquisition. Admiral Kexton checked the tactical display. According to sensors, the human sniper was positioned exactly 2.8 kilometers from the pirate installation, lying prone among surface rocks that provided both concealment and a stable shooting platform. Her rifle was aimed at a window in the main administrative complex where surveillance had confirmed the pirate leader conducted daily operational briefings. Target identified. Lieutenant Commander Chun reported calmly. Subject matches reconnaissance photographs and behavioral patterns. Preparing for engagement. The waiting was the most difficult part for Admiral Kexthan. Galactic military operations moved at the speed of computers and energy weapons. Human operations moved at the speed of patience and precision, waiting for the perfect moment when all variables aligned for mission success. Shot fired, Lieutenant Commander. Chen announced in the same calm tone she might use to report weather conditions on the tactical display. Nothing appeared to happen. There was no energy signature, no explosive detonation, no visible indication that anything had changed at the target location. For several minutes, the pirate base continued operating normally. Then the communication networks began lighting up with confused chatter. Security personnel were reporting that their leader had collapsed during the morning briefing, apparently suffering some kind of medical emergency. Subordinate commanders were calling for medical assistance and trying to establish contact with senior leadership. Target eliminated, Lieutenant Commander Chun confirmed. Transitioning to Target 2, Admiral Kexthan watched in fascination as the human sniper systematically worked her way through the command structure. Each shot was separated by careful observation of pirate responses, waiting for the confusion from the previous elimination to create opportunities for the next engagement. There was no rushing, no urgency that might lead to mistakes, just methodical, professional precision that treated the elimination of enemy personnel as a technical problem requiring technical solutions. Target 5 eliminated, Lieutenant Commander. Chun reported an hour and 40 minutes after her first shot.